Can you please introduce yourself and some of the big projects you're working on here in Texas?
So Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General, been doing this for about 7 years. We have a lot of big projects. We're suing the Biden administration. We've sued them 11 times, 5 over immigration cases. We've joined some lawsuits with other states like Louisiana. We're also involved in big tech, fighting big tech in their monopolistic behavior. We've sued Google. We're part of a lawsuit against Facebook. We're investigating Twitter right now. And then the other big issue is election integrity. We're really focused on that issue and prosecuting election integrity in our state. We can't go fix it everywhere else, but we're also encouraging the legislature to do what they're doing, which is a great job of trying to tighten up some of our voting so that we have elections that we can trust.
Yeah. So, okay, that's a lot to unpack. So let's go through one by one. So a lot of people view the attorney generals like you as sort of the bulwark standing against federal overreach right now with the Biden administration. So that lawsuit you mentioned that you joined in Louisiana, that was against the SCGHG scores, which is the social cost of greenhouse gas scores. Can you tell the audience, maybe if they don't know about that, what that is and how can it affect states like yours?
It's government trying to impact how well competition occurs among various businesses, and they use this social cost of carbon to basically grade people, and it affects their ability to compete. So one of the things that we want to do, I know that Louisiana wants to do, we want to make sure that there's a marketplace, that consumers are the ones deciding which direction to go, as opposed to the federal government shutting down fossil fuels or other legitimate forms of energy that allow us to have opportunity, allow people to have jobs, and allow us to compete against other nations.
Yeah. Do you believe it's within the right of the federal government to do that, or do you believe it was an actual overreach?
No, I think it's absolutely. We're part of the lawsuit. We absolutely believe it's overreach. They don't have the right to do what they're doing, just like these other lawsuits we filed. The fundamental principle here isn't even, carbon or energy or immigration. It's this idea that the President of the United States or his agencies do not have the ability to come in and change federal law. That has to go through Congress, our elected body, our elected representatives. And when a president starts doing that, we start losing our constitutional roles, we start losing our freedom.
Yeah. But what's interesting, though, it seems like in some aspects, the federal government is overreaching, like for instance with these scores, but in other aspects, like for instance the border, they're not reaching far enough. It seems, right? They're sort of letting things go.
Yeah, so it can go either way. One is what you said, they're creating law that doesn't exist, or they're looking at law and say we're not going to enforce that law even though Congress passed it. They're both outside of what the president's supposed to do. His job is to implement what's in front of him, what federal laws are in front of him. If he doesn't do that, he's not operating in his authority under the Constitution and under federal law. That's a problem.
Wow. So can we talk a bit about the border? Can you explain to the audience, if they haven't heard about it, what Title 42 is, what the state of it was prior to the Biden administration, what the state of it is now?
So the main issue that we focused on there is this whole idea of catch and release. And it was something that President Trump started to enforce, where they didn't just grab people and let them go. And so we've actually sued over this. We've sued over the COVID restrictions that the CDC put in place that are supposed to be followed as well. That's another lawsuit that we have. And then we've also got this public charge rule that actually Bill Clinton put into place, where it basically says if you're an illegal immigrant, you're coming into the country, and you're going to be a public cost to us immediately, you can't come to the country and get some type of status to stay here in this country.
So what's the status of Title 42? Has it been rescinded completely, or is it just not being followed to the book?
Well, so no, they're trying to get rid of it, and the problem is it will have an economic and a social cost to it, which means we will have more COVID spreading around the United States, supposedly an issue they care about, but as it relates to immigration, they are pushing it aside as if it doesn't matter.
Yeah, in fact, I was reading some of the reports. Some of the areas where the immigrants, the illegal aliens, are being housed, the COVID numbers are off the charts, like the high double-digit numbers. I have to read another source just because I think it might be a typo how high those numbers are in terms of the COVID cases.
Yeah, it's not surprising. I mean, because these people are coming in from all over the place. They're not necessarily they're not getting tested when they come in. They're not getting vaccinated when they come in. And it's ridiculous given what you have to do as a citizen of this country. If you come in from another country, you have to be tested and you have to follow the rules, and yet somehow they're being excluded because they're illegal. Makes no sense.
So besides this lawsuit that you filed against the Biden administration, can you talk about some of the other things that Texas is currently doing, like the wall project, as well as asking for law enforcement resources from other states?
Yeah, so I think you've nailed it. We are asking for states to help us because this is a problem that affects not just Texas. It's going to affect the entire country. The cartels are becoming immensely powerful under the Biden administration, even more than they were under Obama. They are making lots of money because everybody that comes across the border has to pay them. And so there's a lot of money being made by the cartels just importing people. Second, they're making more off their drugs because Border Patrol is so busy focused on taking care of these people that are coming across the border and housing them and feeding them and all of that, that we're losing some of the drug trafficking into Texas and into the rest of the country. All of that will filter through the country. All of that will have an economic and social cost. And for some reason, the Biden administration is benefiting the cartels at the expense of the American people and even at the expense of these immigrants who are now subject to cartel control.
Why do you think the mainstream media is not covering it as much as as the story warrants? Is it because they're covering potentially for the Biden administration, or is it because they have a different view of what's happening at the border? What's your take on that?
I mean, I think they're covering for the Biden administration. I think they know that there's a real issue down there. They know that the numbers it's factual. The numbers are worse than they were under Obama, that they're getting worse, that there is more drug trafficking, there is more human trafficking, there is more sex trafficking. They don't want to talk about that because it doesn't look good for the president. He's already, as far as the polls go, people are starting to realize that even without the coverage. So the more transparency we have, the more openness about what's actually happening in these centers, which they exclude people from going into, where all these kids are housed, the more people know about that, the less they like it. And of course, the media doesn't want to do anything that would hurt the Biden administration.
How much can these other resources from states do? Because I know that in Texas, you could use those resources to maybe arrest people as they're crossing the border, but you can't deport them because that's a federal issue, right? So how much, eventually you're going to run out of jail space. So what's the long-term here?
So, it's very complicated for us because we have a U.S. Supreme Court decision that was decided when Kennedy was there, and Justice Roberts went with it. And the idea was, Arizona created their own laws to protect their own citizens. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, this is a purview of the federal government. You can't do that, Arizona. Well, that creates a real problem for us because in Texas, if the federal government is not enforcing the laws they have, and then we're precluded because those laws exist from doing anything, then our citizens get hurt. So we have to start doing something to protect our citizens.
So what do you see the long-term effect of this?
I think the long-term effect is we're going to have to find a way to deport people that are coming into our state, either because they're violating state law, and we say, okay, you're out of here because you're violating our state laws, and then make the federal government stop us, and if somehow they can.
Wow. Can you give us a little bit of an update on the wall project?
So the wall project is sad in some ways because what I've seen from the federal government is they stopped a perfectly good project that we know was working, that the Border Patrol was happy with, that our own law enforcement in Texas were happy with, including our sheriffs. And they stopped something that was going along really well. And so now Texas is in a position where we're trying to fund it, which we don't have all the resources we need to fund a 1,200 mile beyond a 1,200 mile border.